Okay, A Man Among Sheep, a short memoir by Tyler Paul. So for this title screen right here, I chose to include my sheep. Just a pretty cool picture to include on the first slide. So yeah. Sheep are an essential part of the Navajo culture, especially to my family and me. My grandaunt has a herd of sheep shared with our entire family. My mother, grandmother, and I have a portion of sheep that was given to us by my grandaunt, whom she raised with for a very long time. This herd of sheep is very important to us as it brings us together as a family. Whatever happens within our family, any disputes or disagreements are thrown out the window when it comes to caring for our sheep. We know what needs to be done, and anything other than providing care and a home for our sheep is insignificant. During this past summer, my day would start around 5:30 in the morning. I'd wake up, wash my face, brush my teeth, get some work clothes on that I don't mind getting dirty, and I'd make breakfast for my grandma and me. Our breakfast before letting the sheep out didn't have to be a 5-star gourmet meal, but it was enough to get us the fuel we needed for the long mornings my grandma and I would have to endure in the truck. I would often make spam potatoes and eggs for the both of us. Just the smell of the eggs cooking and the salty smell from the spam frying on the pan had me excited to go out with my grandma to tend to the sheep's needs. So I just included the sheep, grazing in the valley. He's eating some green. This is in the morning too. Like, I let them out over I'll explain later in the story, but this is like the route that I take the sheep up to go into the valley. And then this is just like all the sheep drinking water in the water trough. So eventually, we'd both get out the door by about 6 to 6:15 in the morning, and it would still feel chilly once we got in the truck and started it. While walking to the truck with keys in hand, my arms would get goosebumps and I'd breathe out a shiver, but it was fine. I had my jacket with me. The cold didn't bother me. The drive to my grandaunt's place was quite calming. Hearing the truck tires scraping and clawing its way through the mud from the previous storm the night before always was just soothing to me. The drive wasn't far from where I lived, about a mile from our house, but once we turned around the corner, past the red hills behind our house, I could see my grandma's sheep corral in the distance. From then on, we'd hop out of the truck, breathe in that cool morning air, and start walking to the sheep corral. My grandma has a dog over named near the sheep corral named Big Boy, a big black and brown Rottweiler looking dog. He begins to bark, but slowly realizes that it's just my grandma and I, and stops barking. He then wag his tail in excitement. Then my grandma would tell me to open the south gate and gather the sheep to take them out on the route that we have them graze. When they run out the gate, the sheep kick up a lot of dirt, so I'd cover my face with my bandana I would wear around my neck. Once we get the sheep all out of the corral, it's smooth sailing from there. So, this is the valley. We will let the sheep graze in. We got the mountains where my grandma's house is, the other side, then this is the valley. Just big old U shape. This is the route going down from the mountains over here. This picture was taken about to where this area was. So they would go over the hill, down this usual route, then into the valley. And this picture is probably around to right here. This is me walking, chasing them down to the valley. I got my speaker, my boots on, just trekking. So just getting the sheep from the corral to the valley for their morning graze is a ton of work, but letting them eat and go on their own for a while is kind of calming. It's nice to spend time with my grandma, and sometimes she will tell me stories of when she was a kid. She was herding sheep for her mother before it got passed down to her and her sister. The very valley we let the sheep roam in is where my grandma would get on the bus for school. That I found interesting, and it's just one of the many things my grandma would tell me when we would sit in the truck or post up on the ridge overlooking the valley watching the sheep. Sheep herding is one of my favorite things to do, but there are other family-held events that revolve around sheep. Another thing that I very much enjoy doing is butchering a sheep on special occasions. This is only done on special occasions, as we can't butcher a sheep for small things like birthdays. With that said, we butchered for when my cousin received her associate's degree from UNM Gallup. The sheep being slain and what goes into doing it would be a bit harsh to explain and to go in depth with. All in all, this process is generally sacred within the Navajo culture and involves killing a sheep in the sake of it being for food, milk, warmth, and the symbolic reminder of one's accomplishment. So this is just a quick like picture of me like chasing the sheep into the valley, chasing them out. Now this is where they get out from the south gate. Usually they're all gathered up here, pretty eager to leave. Then we just chase them out, then they go do their thing. Then before like we butcher a sheep, we have to like shear the wool off before we like kill it or like butcher it, because you wouldn't want that wool on it. I just included a picture of one of the sheepdogs my grandma has. I forgot what her name was, but it's been a while since I've seen that dog. Another thing I extremely enjoy is sheep shearing. This is only done in the spring around March and May, and is when we're the busiest all year. This process involves shearing our herd of sheep and lifting them of the heavy set of wool they have accumulated over the past year. I am almost always asked to help my relatives with certain things, like roping the sheep, tying the legs so they won't kick, getting them on the dolly to be wheeled to shear, and just helping shear in general. Helping my family shear sheep just gets me in a good mood knowing I'm potentially going to be receiving this herd of sheep in the future. All these different things involve my family sheep, and just because of that, it's what brings us all together. For instance, I wouldn't see my aunt for going on a couple months, and when it comes to something like shearing sheep, she'd be in the corral helping the family. It's just so awesome seeing family come together during certain events, so it's basically a family reunion. The sheep are a very important part of my family. It's what brings us closer and closer as a family. Although it can be enlightening to be with family, sometimes we must realize what we have could eventually dwindle away. Just a couple of days before I left to pursue my degree in emergency medicine at UNM, something happened with my family sheep that changed how I viewed them. On one seemingly normal morning, I was with my grandma doing the usual routine, that being getting all the sheep out of the corral and into the valley for grazing. Only this time we took them down south towards the red hills that continue from my house. This was a very poor decision considering what happened soon later, watching the sheep chatting with each other in the morning. My grandma and I were sitting in the truck watching the sheep, chatting with each other and just talking about whatever was going on till the sheep all started sprinting the complete opposite direction. We've had a problem with wild dogs getting at our herd of sheep for a while, and they have killed a couple of our sheep in the past. We don't know where they came from exactly. They were just a community nuisance, and they just so happened to find where our sheep graze. This led to them constantly attacking our sheep for our means of food. Once we saw the dogs running after the sheep, a pack of about 6, my grandma immediately started the truck up and started yelling at the dogs. Earlier that morning, my grandpa had talked to me about potentially running into the pack of dogs that were attacking our sheep. After giving me that talk, he handed me the .22 revolver that I have used before on many different occasions. Also, just to clear up, I have been taught how to handle a firearm and have been informed many times on what not to do with a gun. Remembering that I had the gun on my waist, ready for this exact scenario, had me jump out of the truck with vengeance. I got out the truck and fired at the pack of dogs running after the sheep. I managed to hit a dog in its leg and another in its lower body. After that, my grandma and I gave chase after I fired at the dogs, absolutely flooring it to get all the sheep back together after they all split up after the initial contact with the dogs. When my grandma was driving, I can tell the tone in her voice was dire. I never heard that from my grandma, like she was on the verge of tears knowing that what she has committed her life to could all be gone just like that. Eventually, we got the sheep all gathered up from the chaos the dogs had stirred up and managed to get them all back together. It was such a struggle getting all the sheep back up the hill and into the corral, but my grandma had me go around with the truck to double check if we missed anything. I went back towards the south part by the Red Hills where I had first started, but I found nothing. Then I went around the hill and into the valley, and that's when I seen it. I seen the pack of dogs all gathered around a lone tree that sits in the valley, and I wondered what had them all over there. I parked the truck on top of the hill and walked down to the area where all the dogs were gathered and seen that they were all gnawing and fighting over the corpse of a sheep. That was a shock to me because it looked like it was alive still. So I grabbed my gun out of the holster, aimed, and fired. I hit a black and gray dog. Blood started dripping from its mouth as the bullet pierced its body. I fired another shot and managed to hit another, this time an all-brown dog. Both dogs whipped and howled in pain as the pack scurried away. I never found out if I had killed the 2 dogs or if they still roam to this day. After that, I came to the scene where the dogs were all gathered, and I saw the sheep. The sheep was lying there, still breathing, looking at me with its dying eyes. I stared back, holding back my tears, seeing such a harmless animal, incapable of any harm, slowly succumb to its wounds. I couldn't bear to look at it any longer. I don't know how long I stood there, but it must have been hours. I came back to see my grandma back at the sheep corral and told her what I had seen and what had happened. I could see a tear forming in her eyes, and I held her close, saying it'll be okay. Even now, I reflect and think about that day, realizing that what we have as a family can be taken away in an instant. Sheep are a vital part of my family. They help my family connect with one another and help us all bond together and grow as a family. But what we didn't realize is that the sheep that held my family together can be taken away. A portion of our sheep being killed and injured was a wake-up call. A wake-up call telling us that we were taking the value of our sheep for granted. So, that's the end of my memoir. I have a few pictures of the sheep grazing, eating, just being intrigued by me, my presence. So, yeah. So, student learning outcomes, which also is my reflection. So, question number 1, what is the purpose of the project you created, and how do you think the piece achieves its purpose? The purpose of the project I created is to build an emphasis as to why we should hold on to whatever or whomever we love dearest. I use my family sheep as an example just because there's a lot of fun and family involvement with them. Then with the sheep being attacked and killed is where I realized that I shouldn't be taking the sheep for granted. My family's herd of sheep is a means of affection and family bonding, and it being abruptly altered by the dogs killing and attacking them had me thinking that I should cherish every single moment with them and my family. I think this piece achieves its purpose by explaining what I do with my family prior to the attack, like the various events we do to tend to them. I would further explain their significance to me until the climax where the dogs end up killing a sheep and injuring more. This would prove the purpose of my piece of it being to hold on to those dearest and spend as much time with them as possible, because the dogs coming out of nowhere and potentially ripping away what I love about my family could happen in an instant. Question number 2. Who is the audience? How did this impact your choice of medium? In other words, why is the medium the choice? Why is the medium the best choice for your audience and purpose? The audience of my paper is those who are looking for a memorable narrative that can imagine themselves being in and following along with. I included many visual and sensory details in my memoir, and I feel the reader or audience can feel like they're there with me taking the sheep out and watching them graze. My narrative can also be memorable in a way being that it sticks with them throughout their lives and something that they can reflect on in their own lives. This impacted my choice of medium by me wanting to present it in a voiceover. This is where I can narrate my story and read to the audience in detail along with passion. If I narrate my story, that you can get a feel for my words as I'm reading it to you. My presentation voiceover is the best for my audience and my purpose, as I can tell you what happened myself and tell you personally that you shouldn't take things for granted, but rather spend every single moment you have with them. Also, my medium has pictures alongside it, and I feel that I can get the reader/audience a pretty good insight into what I'm explaining. Question number 3. What were your impressions of the technology you chose to compose with for this project? How did they complement what you created? The project I chose to compose this on will be my computer using the PowerPoint application. I think it was simply using PowerPoint as I have used it before in my high school years, so I felt confident in my ability to produce a well thought out presentation for the MWA, major writing assignment. For my voiceover, I got to use my dorm buddy's microphone and headphones. His name is Ashe. Their name is Ashe, and he's in the same class as me. So that's how we both connected and helped each other out with our narratives. Using PowerPoint also was nice, as I could insert pictures of me doing various tasks with our sheep. This should be they, as they're properly addressed. So just ignore that. Along with those pictures, you can get a sense of what I'm describing, and you feel as if you're there with me doing said tasks. Then with my voice being there to narrate my story, I can show emotion as I'm reading my memoir, so the audience can get a feel for what I've lost or what I'm talking about. I think the voiceover in my project is the strongest part of it all, just because I can change my tone of voice depending on what part of the narrative I'm talking about. Question 4. What rhetorical decisions impacted your decisions, including your technology choices? Some rhetorical decisions I've thought about regarding my technology choices is which pictures I should include in the PowerPoint and how to execute my voiceover. This matters because it can dictate how the reader wants to interpret my project. What I mean is that without the pictures and voice, the narrative itself would appear to be bland. Now, paired with the pictures and voice, it can turn into something that the audience wants to read/listen to. I want the pictures shown to relate to what I'm talking about, and they should also be visually appealing so it keep the reader hooked. Using my voice was also a good way to explain my writing in another intriguing way. Whatever part I was reading, I could change my tone of voice to get the reader/audience in a different mood. This can go for whatever part I'm reading and is a good way to entertain the reader and keep them engaged. Going side by side, utilizing pictures is also good for the reader to have a mental image of what they're reading about. It's like they're there with me herding sheep or opening up the gate to let them out. These decisions impacted my choice and technology choice, and I feel it was the best way to go considering what the memory I've chosen is as well as how I described it. 5. What were the challenges with technology that you faced in this project? How did you overcome these challenges? What was easiest about using this technology? And what did you like? Some challenges that I faced while creating this project would be the incorporation of my voiceover and the creation of the PowerPoint itself. I had to look up a couple ways on how to execute my PowerPoint the way I wanted it to come out, and so I found a tutorial on how to do certain things that involved the design of the first slide and the following slides. Other than that, I retained some information from my past usage of PowerPoint and created the rest of it smoothly. Another thing that gave me a really hard time was transferring my photos from my phone over to my laptop to include in the PowerPoint. I have an iPhone, so when I plugged it into my laptop, it wasn't letting me transfer my pictures. Then the problem was that my photos were synced to iCloud, and I couldn't get them just like that when I plugged it into my computer via USB-C. Then I had to install the iCloud Drive app to my laptop, then put in my email and password. After that was all done, I can get my photos into my PowerPoint finally. Actually recording my voice was simple. I sent my presentation to Ashay in which they can set up his microphone and headphones to get my audio. Ignore that. That's on my part. Then he has an application that can record my application that can record my screen and my audio along with it. Then we can save it as a video and send it into the MWA1 Canvas page. The easiest part of my project was making the slideshows after the first one. I was on a roll and could input pictures I had sent over from my phone one after the next. I found that to be easy, but the part I overall liked was choosing which pictures to go along with my narrative. It was fun to look at past pictures and see my grandma's sheep as well as deciding what to put into the presentation itself. 6. What else would you want your instructor and other audience members to know about the project and your choices? What else I'd like my instructor and other audience members to know about is how much my memory means to me. I can remember when I would come back from school and my grandma would be ready with the truck on saying, "Let's go check on the sheep." That would get me so excited, so I would run outside and change into my work clothes. Run inside and change to my work clothes. Get my boots on and rush out the door with my gloves to go with my grandma to the sheep corral. Just that one thing I remember from back in the day involves the sheep. The dogs that were trying to kill and take them away from me were taking away the bond I would share with my grandma. This goes for any other memory associated, whether it be with my mom, aunts, and little sister. Something else that I'd like my audience and instructor to know is my choices on this project. I chose to do a picture slideshow so I can show a bit of what I do every day back home. Showing pictures of me tying down a sheep's leg and the gun I use to shoot at the dogs can back up what I'm describing, as well as giving more of a clearer picture in the reader's imagination can go a long way. The last question is on the rubric/prompt, but it states, integrate others' positions and perspectives into your writing ethically, appropriately, and effectively in various mediums and technologies. So I just put, the way I integrated others' perspectives was through the peer review our instructor had us do with one another. We were prompted to post our MWA through the discussion board so that our assigned peers would read and give feedback on what we've written. I feel I've gotten the feedback needed to make my project up to the standards of the rubric as well as the prompt. For instance, one piece of feedback I've gotten is that my memoir was too wordy and needed to be simplified a little. I fixed this mistake by toning down my use of words and phrases like to conclude, furthermore, and on the other hand. I felt these words were too generic and I felt like I was following the high school way of writing a paper too attentively. I eased up on transition words like that and just talked as if I was talking directly to the audience/reader. Another piece of feedback I got was that I shouldn't be jumping back and forth between my stories, so I just told it chronologically. I told the events in which it happened and in the order they occurred in. Then it would lead up to the climax and then the resolution. So that's all 7 student learning outcomes, my reflection. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time and hope you have a great day.